the most significant paintings. And she caused me, I thought I had painting and art down in my family room all arranged the way I wanted it, but we're going to rearrange it, and this painting is going to go on my wall in my home along with Arbor Day and with the Winslow Homer paintings. And I wanted you to meet this young woman. Some of you have asked about country school paintings. Sandy had Charlotte paint her school, and for a small fee, Charlotte might be willing to paint your country school as well. But this is Charlotte Hamady, watercolor artist extraordinaire, and thank you for taking time to paint country schools in Iowa.
I loved it, just as I enjoyed painting the barns of Iowa. It was Bill's idea, why not paint country schools? And I said, well, I don't know where there are any. And he told me about one that was right near me in West Des Moines. And I took a look at that and I thought, oh, that sounds like fun. So I just went online and I picked a lot of them, mostly the ones that were picturesque. But actually, one of the schools in the painting is identical to the one that was in Leadville, Colorado, which is where I came from. And another one is very similar to the one that I went to when I was 6, I think, during the Depression in Michigan. But I think that it's a shame that so many have been turned into workshops, garages, well, people's houses. I guess that's okay. But I did see mine a few years back, and the only reason I recognized it was that it still had the flagpole right in front of it. And how many people have a huge flagpole in front of their houses? But it's, this is a print. I do have the original with me. I have a couple of prints, and I also made some posters at my daughter's suggestion. She's a teacher. So I have enjoyed coming here, and most of all, I've enjoyed meeting Bill Sherman, whose idea this was in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you.
I promised Bill when I came down here today, I would keep this to like a 6.5-minute commercial at the end of your day. You're like me, we've been sitting around listening to people in education, and is there anybody that can take a 2-hour bit of information and drag it out 6 hours? No, it's a bunch of teachers, we can do that. What is Spelt Studio, and what can I do for you? Basically, the word I've heard a lot of since that hour I've been sitting back here listening is the word preservation. What Spelt Studio can do for you is we can offer a way, something a little bit more special, that we can help you finance some of your preservation. We're a company, we've been around for 25 years. I taught for 14 years first, retired from that, been running my studio, and then as Bill was explaining, the local art teacher up in Armstrong, he passed away at age 52, massive heart attack, so once again, teaches you that we've got to think for real long futures, yes. And they've asked me to come back and teach. So I'm sort of doing my studio and the school at the same time and having a great time. A lot of people ask me, Mr. Speltz, are you sure you want to go back to education? The kids have changed so much. Well, you know, guys, I taught their parents, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. To be honest, they're great. They learn in the same ways we did when we were young. They just need a little bit different motivation sometimes. And that's what I like about your one-room school. What goes around comes around. One of the things I've been able to put in a lot of my art education when I either talk to colleges or I work in high schools and stuff is that one-room theme really does work. It really does. The older kids teach the younger kids learn it in a different fashion. So please keep doing what you're going to do. To get on with my commercial in the back of the room, basically what my company does is we've worked with a little over 540 cities in 5-state region. We finance every group that we go to. So if we do come to your town, there's never a penny that comes out of your pocket. Okay? What we try to do is we meet with your committee, we find out a little bit about your school, your history of your town. To be honest, some of the towns I've heard today are a little bit big for us. We're a company that works very well in towns, say from 300 to 400 people up to about 5,000 or 6,000 people. Nothing wrong with the big towns, but we have learned that when we get in the size of Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, etc., it is a little bit tougher to get that small town flavor where everybody says, hey, I know where that school was. I remember that on the corner of 5th and whatever out in the country. And we can do much better in some of the smaller towns. So I'm speaking a lot to you groups. We come to your town, we try to come up with a painting or a showcase, a scene that talks a little bit about your town. Your committee works with me. We develop the painting. It should look like a little Terry Redland painting when it's done, if you're familiar with that style. We've given out a little over $2.5 million to groups like yours. So we feel very successful. I myself have won a record 10 state stamps in the field of wildlife art in the state of Iowa. I've done quite a few state commemorative prints, South Dakota Centennial prints, Living History Farm, we worked with them. But my chance today is just to come here and say, hey, here I am. If you're looking for a way to make money, we take these originals, we turn them into little small prints. They go into a 16 by 20 when they're matted and framed, and the prints sell for $35. So again, we try to keep everything very affordable. It's a $35 print. How does my company make a living if we're financing all the projects? The first 40 prints that you sell pay for the project, okay? Still, that's a break-even point. You're gonna make money after that. I'm gonna make a little bit of money, but my real money comes off of matting and framing. About 75% of the people that order the prints get them matted and framed. Bingo. That's how my company keeps on going. So, do they have to buy our matting and framing? Absolutely not. This is just something extra. That's how I make a living. JD, we've got 10 people willing to show your print around for our fundraiser. That's it. That's your only commitment. I will pay for everything. I will do all the work. Please, you guys have a very nice night. I would love to explain a little bit more to you. If you have time, stop by after your meetings. I'm going to be sitting here for quite a while, for at least an hour, to talk to anybody that would like to. Again, thank you very much for letting me come.
My name's Leanne Rondock. I'm the curator of the Johnson County Historical Society. That's my official title. Bill just asked me to come today and talk a little bit about, or give you some ideas for if you want to create exhibits about your country school or about your aspect of the country school. And as he alluded to, I've kind of divided this, my part of the presentation, up into exhibits, outreach exhibits. So what we think of as traveling exhibits that we use to get people to visit either the Coralville School or one of the other sites or places that we manage. We actually have a museum and 3 historic sites that we manage, so we're very busy. And so that's one part. And then another part I want to suggest to you is using exhibits as an opportunity to get people maybe back to your country school. One of the challenges, I don't know if you found, but we found with historic sites is that once people see your historic site, unless you have space to redo things and make it completely different, the challenge is to get people to come back and buy into it and see it again and bring people back to it. And programs are one way of doing that. And I want to suggest or give you the idea that changing exhibits within your school are another way of doing that. And there are ways to do that even though it's such a small space. And then I'd like to hear kind of your ideas or what's worked for you as well. And I brought some assorted materials here. I didn't bring our traveling country school exhibit because it's actually being used, so I didn't want to snatch it away. But I brought one of our other small traveling exhibits. Okay, so the first thing that I mentioned is developing traveling exhibits. And the Moody's will talk about this. They have some fantastic ones to reach out into your community and make people aware of your school. This is and traveling exhibits can be as expensive as you want them to be, or they don't have to be. I know you've seen maybe some of those really fancy, and we, like I'm sure you, have a very small budget when it comes to exhibits and programs. So with traveling exhibits, you know, some of those really nice, polished, graphically made, we have some of those, and a 2x3 like panel is $75 a piece to produce, and then you have to do the layout and everything like that. So the things that I'm going to show you are kind of the inexpensive things that we do, but if you have any questions about the other pieces, I'd be happy to answer it. So we put together a couple years ago a traveling exhibit about country schools in Johnson County. And we have a country school, and we share the story of the Coralville School, but we also, as a county museum, have collecting about all the country schools in Johnson County. So our responsibility and our mission is not only to tell the story of the Coralville School, but to tell the story of all the schools. So this is a traveling exhibit that we did. It's basically this type of threefold thing. This is the same thing. I just brought our Johnson County Fair exhibit. As I said, the school exhibit is in use. And we had done a series of oral histories with country school alumni and teachers, and we use that as kind of the basis, those stories that they told us as the basis for these exhibits. When we do traveling exhibits like this, we don't use any originals. So these travel, they're in different places. We don't know how watched they're going to be. We don't know exactly who's going to be viewing them in terms of how close they're going to be, and I mean, they're not someplace where they're watched. So, and they're usually two-dimensional because it's a lot easier to find space and so forth, and that's what we can do easily. So this is a two-dimensional exhibit, and these are all materials that are reproductions. So we do not only copies of photographs, we do copies of documents, in the case of the school, teachers' certificates, maps, reward of merits, school souvenirs, photos. Here is from our fair exhibit. We have a 4-H club program, and from the 1917 Johnson County Fair, the Alaskan Trios, which were pretty impressive, apparently. And so we use those to create our two-dimensional traveling exhibit. Now there's different ways that we've done this with traveling exhibits. The other thing that you have to decide then is how you're going to mount them and how you're going to put them up. This is something that we do. These from Jackson County, these are also great ways. These are really cheap, these trifold things. There's not a lot of investment in photographs. They're very colorful. They attract people. And we want to also, in addition to the photos, try to help tell a story and have people come away with learning something as well. And we do this in a couple of different ways depending on the exhibit. We have taken photographs, reproduced them. Now if you have a computer and you can scan them in and you can print them out and you could do this, or you can go to Copyworks or your copy store and they can make a color copy of photos, which is what we used to do. And you can cut them out and mount them. If you want some dimension, one possibility is foam core, which is not that expensive, like a piece of foam core, I think 2x3 at Walmart is about $5, so it's not hugely expensive. And when you mount these, I mean, all you need is a nice steel ruler. Don't use a wooden one because you'll cut into it, and an X-Acto knife to cut these out. So that's one possibility. With these exhibits, we decided not to use this. But we did it a different way, and these look laminated, which is basically what they are. And again, with today's technology, it feels like it's falling off, you can laminate pretty easily. You can, if you have a laminator, and you can get, But these were done the poor man's lamination technique, which I learned from my mother, the former school teacher. And these were laminated. It's much more labor intensive than if you have a laminating machine. Those sheets you can get, they're not that expensive, but I mean, it's an investment. This is clear contact paper. So some of you are nodding, you already know this technique, where it's a little bit, you have to kind of get a technique, but you use a piece of clear contact paper, put your reproduction, remember, never do this to an original. Put your reproduction on top of it, another piece on top, flatten it out, cut it out, and you've got a little laminated thing. And the reason we started doing this, as opposed to the things on foam core or things stuck to mat board, is we do a lot of, put a lot of exhibits like places where it's really humid, like the county fair and things like that, and we find that this humidity can really affect it, and it can kind of start to warp and fall apart. And this, again, lamination works really well too, but this also worked really well for us. Again, it's more labor intensive than if you take it and put it through a laminating machine, but that's just another idea. Okay, now you have this exhibit, you've decided what you want to put on it, you've laid it out, you've either laminated or mounted things on foam core, you've decided your text and printed that out. Now you have to tell people you have it, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. One of the things that we did is we identified places where we thought they might have space and be interested in it. Banks, libraries. We have many banks. I don't even know how many we have in our community. If you take Johnson County, we have 7 or 8 libraries, community libraries. They're looking for exhibits often. Banks, I know the Moody's mentioned Hy-Vee at one time was looking for an exhibit, so be creative. I would have never thought of that. Now I'm going to go to Hy-Vee and see if they want our exhibit. This just shows what we gave to people to send when we sent things out, that told about it, accompanying with a letter, and what it is, the fact that it's free, how long they can have it. And then we did a little diagram that showed the dimensions so that they would know exactly what type of space we need. And with these are really nice because all you can need to do is have a table, is all they need to have, and they can put it on a table and then you have something. We traveled this a few years ago, as you could see by the date, and then recently we traveled this again. This summer we had a several-day country school event in August, and we really wanted to promote that. And we thought a good way to promote that is having, with the brochures, is having an exhibit that traveled around. So this exhibit was at several local banks, a couple local libraries, and in the weeks preceding the event in order to promote that actual event. So not only was it, it wasn't specifically promoting our schoolhouse, but it was promoting our country school event that we were going to have. But you could adjust it. So that's kind of a little bit about traveling exhibits. I know the Moody's are going to talk more. We don't, another thing to think about traveling exhibits, we don't use anything real. Most of our traveling exhibits are two-dimensional. But we do exhibits, and this is something to think about, places that already have cases where we can put things into. So for example, both the Iowa City and the Coralville Library have display cases, and they're often looking for somebody to set up an exhibit. So we have a good relationship with both of those libraries, and we talk to them. We've set up a country school exhibit in the case that's part of the children's room one fall when they wanted to promote schools and so forth, and they can pull out all the books that they have related to country schools. And then also we've done exhibits in the main part of the library, Coralville Library as well. So if your local library has an exhibit case, you may talk to them about possibly reserving a time and setting up a display there to promote your country school. Banks often have this also. So we've been able to use this in combination with, for example, Hills Bank in Coralville, one of our local banks, has a case that is dedicated to preserving or to displaying things from local organizations. So this was a great opportunity for us. Not only could we have our two-dimensional exhibit, but we could put some artifacts or some materials in a case. It's locked. It's a bank. So we felt pretty confident about that, but we always check that out first before we put artifacts in there. Okay, and then also I want to suggest that exhibits can be used within your country school to get people back to your school. And this is a little bit more challenging because, of course, you have your space. You use your space for all sorts of programs, reenactments, and so forth. So thinking about ways to set up an exhibit in a school that's used other ways can be challenging. And I've just got a couple ideas. You may have some of your own. So one of the things that we have done is simply, and this is a very small changing display, is taken a display case. This was the former Sharon Center High School trophy case that was given to us by the high school when at some point they closed in the 40s, but at some point people had this stuff and they were getting rid of it. And so one of the things in our country school, in the Coralville school, the things that the kids interact with, for the most part, are all reproductions. So we have items that, original items, artifacts, some of which were used by, used at the Coralville school, some of which were used at other country schools in Johnson County, and we don't want kids necessarily to interact with those, but we also thought we want to be able to have them when they visit the country school to see some real stuff that was really used by kids. And so we have kind of two different time periods. The one case, it's the same exhibit case if you don't recognize it. The one on the left we set up as kind of a mixture of time periods that has a whole bunch of different artifacts from different eras of the country school. The one on the right is now from our circa 1880 classroom, and it has objects that would have been familiar to kids who attended school in the Coralville area in the 1870s and 1880s. One thing I'll point out that's there's a slingshot up there, by the way. And we have something, not things you'll notice that are necessary, so kind of think outside of the box. We have things that are specifically related to country schools, like slates and autograph books, photographs of 8th grade graduation, school bell, and so forth, Spencerian copybook from the time period, pointer. But we also have some things that are, as Terry was showing in different pictures as you think about things, that would be involved with kids and going to the country school. So we have some little button shoes there, and we actually talk about, you know, the fact that it's likely that the kid who might have owned that most of the year went to school without shoes, and this would be the winter, or the sunbonnet that the kids would have worn. So those are things that we can't specifically relate to a country school, but they're certainly familiar, and they kind of fit in with that. And another thing to mention, again, when you're using your original things, to think about displaying them. You want people to be able to see them, but of course, often our first priority is to preserve them and not do any harm to them. So that's something you have to think about too, and those kind of things don't necessarily always go hand in hand. So we have, what you can't see is the photographs and stuff that we used. In this case, I don't think it's a copy, but often we use copies even in this type of display. But if not, we will put things into plastic sleeves, things that, so you're not stapling or pinning things directly into the artifact, just for different, just to give different texture and stuff too. Sometimes we create boards that have a different background. This one is from our flood exhibit, hence the sand. So it's not related to schools, but you could find fabric or something that's related to schools and cover. And then we've created, with some Mylar, this is an inert plastic that's often used in museums that you have to order. But we've created a sleeve, and we can put our document in that and hang it up without hurting that original document. So I think that's really important, and that's sometimes you have to sit back and think about that. And I brought some other things that we use to support, make sure things have support. You'll notice our sunbonnet there. It's got a head that gives it some support. The pointer that's down there is actually hung by a couple pieces of Mylar that are giving it some support. Same with the books and the other things. And so these plastic things, these are running around. We use a lot of fabric-covered boxes. If you take this apart, you know, it's a box like you'd find anything else. But the fabric is a good protection for the artifacts too. So you can take a little corner, just one display case, and you can change it and bring people into your museum. You could tell a different story of your schoolhouse or a different aspect of going to a country school, focusing on readers, McGuffey readers, or curriculum, or recess, or something that's autograph books, something that's specific also, and you can change it out. We've used different things. Another thing you can use, again, finding space where all of your country school room is used up by desks and things. There's often space. We use our cloakroom walls. Sometimes there's space there. We're fortunate we have a two-room schoolhouse, a brick two-room schoolhouse, and as Bill said, the bottom is interpreted as a late 1870s, early 1880s classroom when the school first opened. And our goal is to have the upstairs eventually opened as a 1940s classroom, which is the last decade this building was used as a school. We've started that process, and one of the things that we've done is developed an exhibit that goes up the stairs. This is where we've taken the opportunity to tell kind of the other history, a little bit of that school, in addition to the 1870s and the 1940s. And so we have a timeline going up the steps, talks about the Coralville School. So basically you're going from 1880, which is where that photo was taken, and the photos that go up the steps to the second floor show different classes from the school as the time period changes. So here you can see some classes, and interspersed with that, we have a timeline. And timelines, I think, are great because they put things in context. And I'm not a teacher, but I think kids sometimes have a hard time with where things are in line compared to other things. So timelines are really great, and what we wanted for this timeline was a couple different things. For each section of timeline, we wanted what could, something that was happening in the US in general, so people from all over would be able to recognize that event, an Iowa event, and a Coralville event, or something local event, so that everything is kind of put into this large perspective. And so I don't know that we got that in every timeline, but you can see they're color coordinated. The more national events are purple, the state events are green, and the local events are orange. Now we got a grant to do these. These photographs were photoshopped. They're not, the originals are not in this great of condition. We actually got a grant to have somebody go in and clean them up a little bit where they were torn and so forth. And also they're mounted on board, this really heavy duty board. We have a great art gallery in Iowa City, and he's not a graduate of a country school, but his family goes back a long ways to the Coralville connection and went to the country school. And so he actually helped us mounting these. So this was an expensive little project, but we got a grant. But the timelines, that was just for the photo. The timelines that we did are not on board. They're on just foam core. This is our flood timeline, but that's all those are, because the grant didn't cover actually doing the timelines. That we thought of later. So, and we have some report cards and other artifacts. So that's one thing about using kind of any space that you have. And you don't have to put things on the wall. You can use corners and so forth. And there's the top of the stairs there. So we've got all the way around to the 1930s there. And the dapper gentleman, you can kind of see Emory Rhodes is one of the teachers. He was actually brought in from southern Johnson County because the woman that they had teaching couldn't handle the older students. So, and this is harder for you to, and all of us to do for a country school. But we did do this on one occasion where we actually shrunk our schoolroom and did a bigger exhibit about the story of the Coralville School. And so you can see we have dividers, so that the actual desks and everything are all toward the other side of those dividers. But this is also a possibility too, even for a temporary basis, depending on how much work you want to put into it. And we put up cases and things like that to use. But I also wanted to show you this because these panels that are hanging there that actually have some photos and information, they're hanging there from the top of those panels from fishing line. We use fishing line a lot because it's invisible and very strong. We use it also sometimes in the Historic House Museum. We manage to tie things down, small things, to make sure they don't walk away, or in exhibits sometimes too. But all those blue things are basically mat board. It's a large piece of mat board. You can take it, you can cut it, you can mount your photos onto it. You could mount a photo on a foam core and put it a little off of the mat board to give it some dimension, and then you hang it up. And you can take it somewhere and hang it. You can use it here. You could hang it on a spare wall. It's something that's pretty easy to use and to do. And then again, these are actually all things. We actually have a whole collection of things from one of our teachers in the 1940s, Adelaide Pryor. She actually never taught in our school. By the 1940s, Coralville was really growing, but they still had this school. So she had to teach 4th, 5th, and 6th grade in the town hall, which was down the street. So she never actually taught there. She had in the basement. And the kids who went to school in that building at the time tell us that was also where the police station was. And if the police arrested somebody, they'd bring them in right into the schoolroom, because the place where they booked them was apparently off in the corner, and there was a curtain, and they'd bring them in and wheel a curtain around or something to keep them from the kids. So, but these are all her teaching materials and her dress. Again, if you're hanging textiles like a dress and you don't have a mannequin, you want to make sure that you have the shoulders supported. We use padded hangers, so we take a hanger and wrap it with batting and then put a nice muslin sleeve on it. But that's some ideas there too. And this is just the design when the exhibit was planned out. So you can see we halved our schoolroom and put most of the exhibit on this side. And these are those mat board kind of just panels that are easy to do. They're easy to punch holes through, whatever you need. So that's basically all I have. I just wanted to show you. Let's see if I didn't show a couple of things here. Oh, another thing that we found is in the museum more when we do exhibits, is this is really nice if you have something, if you have a case and you can do a nice frame. We found these frames $1 at the dollar store. So if you have a dollar store, these two, and they just put a nice kind of polish on it. For supports, especially for this old library book stands, we put a little bit of cork on the bottom so they don't slide as much. And you can put something like that on it. And you can bend it back, as you need it. Those work really well. So I just brought those. Those were just some ideas. And in terms of putting things, sticking things on, adhesives, we use a couple of different things. The spray-on adhesive is the most, lasts the longest. But I hate this stuff because everything gets sticky, and if you don't have, we don't have a room to do it, so we have to have the front door wide open, and the wind comes in and it blows your things away. So We also use double-sided tape, the small kind. We usually order it, but you can use any kind of double-sided tape to mount. It doesn't last as long because what you'll see is the inside if you just tape it around the edges, it'll start pulling out. So for long-term things that we're going to want to travel for years, we don't use the double-sided tape. But the adhesive is, and if you have a technique for using this that doesn't get everything sticky and keeps the fumes away, let me know. Any ideas before? The Moody's are going to come up. They have some fantastic exhibits. They've traveled around with objects and everywhere, and I wish he was closer. I would have him build me some things that I could use.
5 years ago, our Adams County, Illinois Retired Teachers Association had the idea to restore a school. We were totally unaware. Thank you. We were totally unaware that there was a national organization or the Iowa group, so we were just doing the best we could. We looked at a lot of schools. Most of them were in such ill repair we could not move them. We found one that had already been moved, restored as a gift shop, and they no longer wanted to use it that way. So we did move it to some land owned by the Old Time Association of Adams County. It's adjacent to Adams County Fairgrounds. The two organizations work together. The Old Time Association has a round barn museum, which has farm equipment on the lower level, the upper level, 1930s home. And so all the members that could either donated or found items for the school. The first couple years, both groups had it open on Sundays, and very few people came. Then it occurred to us that we needed something special. And so we went to one Sunday a month in the nice weather months, and we had food, and that always draws people. And they could just make donations. We had art projects for children, and then Paul and I would coordinate a country school display at the round barn, so it went along with the school next door. But then we thought, well, this past Sunday we had over 100 people visit, so we're thrilled with that. But we also thought through the years we need to do more, get to groups that can't drive the distance to where the school is. So Paul will tell you about that.
The display that we do is on the second picture, a trifold right over here. That was the one that we did at Maquoketa this past year. And what we have done, we will take our school display to to really any place that will allow us to move it in. We go to the Farm and Home Supply store. We've gone to the Quincy Mall and put it up in the center of the aisle. We've gone to the library, as other people have commented. The Hy-Vee stores were doing a competition on how each Hy-Vee store, there are 200 plus Hy-Vee stores, they were in a competition to see how they can recognize the farmer. So they invited the Old Time Association to come in, and of course our school display came in. And I think the Hy-Vee manager at our store said he doesn't want to win first place because the management will be there for a whole week. He wanted second place. Well, he got second place. But we take our display, and every time we've taken our display, there's been something that I thought I could do better. I shouldn't say we thought we could do better. At one point we had these display boxes and they were laying flat on the table. You had to come and look straight down at it to see it. And I didn't like that. So I decided I'm going to make a frame and put them up on an angle. So you can be walking by the display and peruse across the items, and if something catches your eye, wow, I'll stop and look at it. Another thing we did, some of the first ones, we had small print. And, the people were having trouble, walking by and glancing at that, where we've enlarged the print, and we've used smaller, used fewer words and just larger print, so they can, somebody in the second row or third row back can read the display. Likewise, as Leanne said, we use foam board. We do use the wonderful spray. It does go everywhere. But what I've done, I've taken some newspaper and laid out, and every time I glue one on, I fold the newspaper over, and I get rid of it, and I take a new piece of newspaper. So it eliminates the stickiness on the whole counter. The stickiness is still, the smell is still in the air and all that. But the foam board is wonderful. We have the map of, the test of 1918, and it's a real long test. Well, the people tried to read it, and I pick it up and I said, it's a whole lot easier to hold it in your hand and read it. And so it's handleable, handleable. You can handle it, and you won't be able to destroy it. The one thing that almost all of our artifacts are the real thing. We're learning that we need to protect them. We have a map of the United States in 1847, and it took about 3 times rolling it up and unrolling it to say, whoa, we got to stop. We can't do that because it's falling apart. So we put it behind plexiglass, and now it's a 4x8 sheet that we have to figure out how to mount and how to display that. Well, I came up with an upright display rack, and we have the board, the display trays in front of that on an angle, and some of that relates to the map. The second map we have is a map of the first 11 presidents, and that ends with James Polk. Did I know that? No, I looked it up. In 18, James Polk was a president from 1845 to 1849. Well, that matches the map of the United States, which stops with Missouri. California wasn't there yet because it didn't come in until the 49ers with the gold rush. And some kids today have looked at the map and said, where's California? Where's the rest of the United States? And then we explained to them, well, it wasn't there yet. That was Indian territory. And now we have that up on, instead of being on a table, we have that up on a wall, and you can see that. It's protected with plexiglass. Now, I'm thinking that the plexiglass is not UV, because we take our display outside, it should be UV protected, ultraviolet. Well, I haven't, I talked the plexiglass man into the first sheet of plexiglass, and I haven't talked to him about, hey, could we have one that's UV? The other thing we're doing is we're considering purchasing a roll of the Mylar film, which is acid-free. Likewise, with all of our reward of merit cards in the back, those are just on with little ear corner tabs. They should be under some kind of a protection. A strong wind has blown some of those away, or at least blown them off the board. We need to put some kind of a protection on that. So we're progressing our displays to the extent that we need to make them more visible, make them safer. The Bell collection, when Bill said, could we bring our Bell collection, I thought, okay. And I didn't want to just have them on a table. So I made that framework for the stands to display the bells. And then there was that big void in the middle. And I thought, okay, what am I going to put there? So I went out to the barn, and that bell did come out of a country school near us. The belfry had fallen off, and when the school was closed, after school was closed, and the schoolmaster, school marm, took it over and put it in the shed, and we acquired it from there. It was not in very good shape. So the other day, meaning Monday of this past week, I called up the sandblaster, and I said, can you sandblast my bell? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, now it's a number 2 school bell. And I'm thinking, okay, how much is this going to cost? He said, $10 to sandblast it. And I thought, you don't do anything for $10 anymore. And so he said, bring it out. Well, I found out that he has a huge brass bell in his front yard. I mean, this thing, the bottom of the bell, it's got to be over 4 feet wide, and it's dated 1889. It was a church bell. And he's got the knowledge of bells. And he looked at my bell and he said, you've got a good one. Most of the bells he sees are reproductions. He said, this is an old bell. This is a authentic bell. And we gave it to him at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. My wife picked it up at 6 o'clock that night and said, $10. Well, it was quite a shock, because nobody does that for $10. Then he said, paint it. And you want to use this kind of paint because all the bells of that kind were painted black to begin with. So we put a quick coat of paint and brought it up. But everything we do, we're all preservationists. Everyone in this room is a preservationist. We want to preserve the history of education. We want to preserve the artifacts that have come, that we've acquired, that you have acquired and put in your schools. We need to display them. And because our country school is so far away from Quincy, we need to bring it to the people. It tickles me no more. I can't believe that if I have my school display set up and somebody stops and looks at one of the items and starts smiling, they've got a story to tell. And they're reminiscing back to their days when they were in the one-room school. The grandparents are bringing the grandchildren, and they say, this is the way it was. We had to sit, I was sitting here and my brother was sitting over there. And, it's neat to see how they interrelate to the grandchildren. The grandchildren, really. So we feel that the way we're preserving our country school displays is a little bit different. It's more different than all of yours, because yours is in a school. Ours we put on the road, and we have fun doing that. With that, I thank you for your time.